Alabama fans are crazy. The team that has been on everyone's lips if you speak, talk, think, discuss, casually ponder college football has been the Alabama Crimson Tide. Tonight's episode is about Georgia, but we're going to go around the tree to get there. Alabama fans are crazy. I know this because they've shown me. Now, one more little caveat right here. If this isn't you, this isn't about you. So moving forward, if I didn't know better, I would think that Alabama fans had a real inferiority complex, like a real crisis of identity. Like they're really struggling these days with exactly who they are. And if I were right, that would be perfectly understandable. The greatest college football coach of all time just retired from the University of Alabama. They've named his successor, and the football operations over in Tuscaloosa are continuing on as they are around the country. Time waits for no man. Things are moving forward, and from the outside looking in, it appears that the Alabama fans are wrestling with this fact. They're having a hard time coming to grips with the new world. And yes, with the new world order. In fact, I have a little bit of a live look in at what was going on in Alabama over the last week.
Man, God, 17 is a crap! Welcome to the party, pal!
Now, I thought that was funny as all get out. I put that together. I enjoyed it a whole lot because every Alabama fan I knew was under some level of anxiety, stress, angst, anger, discomfort. Pick your adjective. And when it's not happening to you, it's funny. It's fun to watch. Not gonna lie. Not gonna lie. But nothing was happening to Alabama that hasn't been happening to the rest of college football. It's just that Alabama was the one that had their foots on everybody's neck for the last 15 years. I have no problem admitting that. That's what happens. You have one team that's in really good shape and then everybody else is shooting for them. No problem. That's college football. That's what it's all about. Now at Alabama, they have a new guy in charge, though. His name is not Nick Saban. His name is Kalen DeBoer. Now, here's where I say I think Alabama fans, they might be a little sideways. And again, it's understandable. You haven't been here. You don't know what it's like. There's an entire generation of Alabama fans that have no understanding that there was a period of time, other than two coaches in their history, where Alabama was not good. They were average. Consistently average. Again, that takes nothing away from the two zenith points that they have achieved. But that's not the entirety of their history. So for an entire generation of young fans who know nothing except double-digit victories, nothing except competing for championships at every turn, every year, nothing except top-rated talent on their football team, top-ranked recruiting classes year after year. What they're going through right now is a bit of a rude awakening. And that's why I say all of this is understandable. This is understandable because they've never dealt with it, especially that younger group. And the older people, it's been so long since they were here or could be here not on top, let me say it that way, that maybe they've forgotten what it feels like. Maybe they have forgotten what it feels like to have to be down in the mud with the peasants and the rest of college football. So I don't blame them for feeling a little bit of anxiety, a little tumult in their college football world, if you will. Now, you would think that just Saban retiring would be enough. That would be the end of this story. But it's not. It's not by a long shot. And a large part of that has to do with Georgia. And I think that is where the tit for tat, back and forth with us Georgia fans comes from here lately, this last week. I mean, again, I don't know what else to call it other than an inferiority complex or a crisis of identity when I am saying nothing about your program, nothing outside news of the day or stating pure facts. If I'm only speaking those words into existence and I have Alabama fans just all over me, frothing, then it just leads me to think that they've sort of lost touch with who they are. They can't find their touchstone, if you will. Why else would you come onto a Georgia page or constantly be watching Georgia content and then feeling the need to somehow discredit Georgia or remind everybody of your past successes if you weren't going through a bit of a rough time? If you needed to convince yourself that everything's going to be okay. Now, I don't know everything. I don't know a whole lot, but I know enough to know when somebody's hurting, and I know that people who are hurting want to hurt other people. And that is what I have experienced over the last 7 or 8 days. Again, it's not completely misplaced. Georgia has a lot to do with what might be happening inside the Alabama fans' head right now. What's going on with their psyche? Let's look at the facts. Since Alabama and Nick Saban won their last national championship, which proved to be Nick's last championship, Kirby Smart and Georgia have won 2. In the time that Kirby Smart has been at Athens, he's won as many titles as Nick has won at Alabama. Had won at Alabama. Kellen DeBoer is a good football coach. But he cannot be Nick Saban. He will not be Nick Saban. Alabama, regardless of how good a shape they are still in, is going to have to figure some things out. And it's not unreasonable to expect them to potentially take a step back in 24. Alabama's last 2 teams under Nick Saban, according to talent composite rankings, were the 2 most talented teams in the history of the sport of college football. And what do Alabama fans have to show for it? 0 titles. National titles. 74 of Alabama's scholarship players on last year's team were 4 or 5 star players coming into Alabama. Now, we just watched what happened this past week at Alabama with players deciding to jump in the portal and things like that. And we all saw and heard from Alabama fans who were all up in arms and blaming the system and, gosh darn, this portal, those young kids have no loyalty. They don't know anything about the brand. They don't care about Alabama. Now, I think that's nonsense. It's always about the players. Any success any coach has is because of players. They have to go recruit those players to come play at their school. Players commit to come to a school 99% of the time because they are committing to a person, a head coach, a position coach. All the other stuff, all of Alabama's mythical 25 national championships or whatever they say they have, all of the facilities, that's just on the periphery. It's nice. But when you have a chance to go play for the greatest to ever do it, like Nick Saban, that's what you're going for. And when Nick decided he wasn't going to be at Alabama anymore as the head coach, well, of course, those young men wanted to take a look around and see what else was out there. Some of them left because they wanted to go home. Some of them left for better opportunities, for playing time. Some of them simply left because they felt like they needed to do what was best for them. And more power to them. You will not hear me say tonight on this show or at any point in the future that I am anti-NIL or the anti-schools paying for players to come because they give them NIL deals or any of that. That's not my position. You will not hear that. But the Alabama folks, some of them, they don't like it none too much. And here's the reality of what Alabama's facing right now. If you look at it, I think it's completely fair to say that inside the SEC, which is the best conference in the country, Alabama's no longer the top program. From where I sit, there are at least two programs that are in better position today than Alabama's program. The University of Georgia, I would rate as the top-rated program in the SEC today. And given just the general trajectories of the two programs that are like ships passing in the night, I would probably put Texas at number 2 right now. Then I would drop in Alabama. So what does that mean in the real world? What does that actually mean for Alabama as we move into 24? Again, worlds are colliding and things are changing, and Alabama fans are having a hard time dealing with it. But what it actually means is that now these Alabama fans that, I'm not trying to be mean, I'm trying to be honest, have a sense of entitlement that no other college football fan in the country can enjoy. They are looking at their Alabama squad, not all but some, saying, yes, Nick retired, but we are Alabama. We're always the best. Alabama will have a tremendous season. There will be no drop-off in 24. Alabama will win the SEC. Alabama will win the national championship. Now, you might scoff and say, who in their right mind is going to say that? That's my point. I have heard this not once, repeatedly over the last week and a half. These people are out there. Good luck to Kellen DeBoer. Because the reality is, he is taking over an historically great program. He has a tremendous roster today, even with the defections. But remember what I told you. 74 of their 85 scholarship players on last year's team, 4- and 5-star players. After the departures through the portal and via players leaving early for the NFL draft, Alabama only lost 12 of those type players. Now, 12's a big number. There are only like 3 programs in the country that can look at 12 and think, yeah, I can weather that kind of loss. But it's not the end of the world at a place like Alabama. They are still very talented. Kalen DeBoer has every opportunity to field a very competitive football team next year. But I would say it's not a stretch to think that the average Alabama fan is expecting Alabama to be competitive, to compete for an SEC championship, and to absolutely make the 12-team field for the college football playoff. And then anything can happen. Football happens. I don't think that's unreasonable to say about an Alabama fan's expectations for 2024. But here's the thing. They still have an Alabama quality roster, but they don't have a Nick Saban roster. And there is a difference. The only way you dominate the sport the way Nick Saban has over the last 15 years is with a Nick Saban caliber roster. And they don't have that anymore. Yet, Alabama fans, on the whole, have the exact same level of expectation that they had with Nick. There are a few out there who are proclaiming it to be absolute truth. That's not all of them, but they're out there. But even the calmer, more rational Alabama fans, they think Alabama should be what they have been, even if they give DeBoer a year. In year 2, it better be the way we think it should be. All I can say to Alabama and Kalen DeBoer and Alabama's fans is welcome to the knife fight. You don't have what you had. The situation's different. And at this point, I just told you, I think Georgia's the best program in the conference. Given where we are today, I think Texas is probably too. That means that Alabama is on the slide back. And it's not that everybody else is standing still. You've got the group behind Alabama that are on the come up. Think about it. LSU, Brian Kelly. Tennessee, Josh Heupel. Ole Miss is projected to be a top 5 team heading into the season next year. Texas A&M, Texas, Oklahoma. Alabama is going to be in a brass-knuckled knife fight, a rock fight, just to hold them at bay until Kalen DeBoer proves to us that he's something other than what we think he is. Is he superhuman? Is he going to recruit, I don't know, five stars every season in every recruiting class? Is Alabama going to be able to pull together the sort of NIL machine that places like Texas, Texas A&M, Ohio State, the kind of thing that they've managed to pull together? Is he going to have that at his disposal? Or is it going to be a down in the ditches muddy fight every week to not even think about playing for championships, but simply to keep everyone else in their place from an Alabama fan's point of view? And then once they've secured that position, take their shot at the perceived upper echelon of the SEC as far as I look at it right now. Alabama fans, a little crazy, but I get it. I understand. This is not a hate rant from me. I'm trying to be compassionate to your situation, and I'm pleading for you to take a deep breath, step away from the keyboard, walk backwards, focus on your team. Don't worry about Georgia or Texas or whomever. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. Again, I think Georgia draws a lot of the Alabama ire because of their position in the sport over the last few years. I mean, let's talk about Georgia. I've spent a lot of time talking about Alabama. Let's just drive home that point of why Georgia might be taking the incoming from your average Alabama fan. Let's see. The Dogs have won 30 out of their last 31 games and 46 out of their last 48. 3 straight 12-0 regular seasons. That's never been done in the history of the sport. And the program in Athens is doing that while Nick Saban's most talented teams in the history of the sport have failed to win the national title, which is the expectation. Alabama's not Vanderbilt. They're not Auburn. And they're 0-2 in the last couple of years, while Georgia was on the steady incline, taking on all comers. Georgia has had 3 straight years being perfect in league play. That's 8-0, 3 consecutive seasons inside league play during the regular season. Back-to-back national champions in the college football playoff, NIL, transfer portal era. When there's 4 teams in the playoff, Georgia's the only school to go back-to-back. Not only did Kirby and Georgia step up and just snatch the crown off of Nick's head in 21 and blow him out in his final national championship game appearance, they went on to back it up with the most dominating victory in bowl game history the next season for back-to-back titles. And they did it while the greatest of all time was watching. That's impressive. Georgia, 39 straight regular season victories. An SEC record, 27 straight regular season SEC wins. A 25-game home streak. 3 consecutive 13-win seasons. Again, I get it, Alabama fans. You might be a little crabby. Georgia went from being a 10-win team that occasionally would play in Atlanta for the conference title to being a team that was literally dominating the sport for the better part of the last 3 years. And your program, which absolutely felt entitled to play for the national championship every season, missed out 3 straight years with the most talented team in the history of the sport under the greatest head coach in the history of college football. So I get it. But again, my advice would be, don't worry so much about Georgia. Worry about Alabama, because there's plenty going on over there in Alabama to keep you busy.
Told him, how about them fucking dogs? That's what I told him.